Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to our channel, and thanks for logging on. If you enjoy these videos, do me a favor and subscribe to our YouTube channel right here at Watchbox Reviews. I'd really appreciate it, and I promise to update daily. If you like these watches, you can see them both and purchase them on our website, thewatchbox.com. Today, we are comparing oversized dive watches from two of the top names in watches. In fact, East and West, respectively. Grand Seiko and Rolex, both fully integrated manufacturers, maybe the most integrated manufacturers. We're talking about the Rolex Oyster Perpetual Sea Dweller 126600, bowed 2017, the 50th anniversary Red Sea Dweller, and then off to the left, the 2017 iteration of the long-running SBGA229 Grand Seiko Spring Drive Diver. We're going to start with the Rolex because this is the birthday boy, relatively speaking. 51 years old now, the Sea Dweller collection, established in 1967, originally designed as professional equipment for Comex divers, but by 2017 firmly rooted in the world of luxury. And this watch, 43mm, replaced the 40mm Sea Dweller 4000. And you can see it is a big watch, though it wears so much different from the 44mm deep sea that they feel like different species. On my 16cm circumference wrist, the now 51-year-old Sea Dweller family sits, well, loud and proud. It's a big watch, 43 across, not including crown or crown guards. A thick watch, 15mm thick, but not nearly as thick as the deep sea, and that by about 2.5mm. From lug to lug, the case is nicely constrained. It's only 50.5mm, but the end links of the bracelet are broad, and they do extend the watch to 53.7mm across the wrist. And if you're crazy enough to try to put this watch on some sort of a strap, not the worst idea in the world. Great options are now available. 22mm is the size. The timepiece features a Rolex Oyster bracelet that is tank tough, or perhaps I should say secure enough to anchor a battleship. The individual links are all satin down the top and the flank, polish on the outer shoulders, sizable links removed by screws, and the clasp a little bit more versatile than what you'll find on a sub. Yes, glide locks there with its 20mm of adjustment in 2mm increments, but there's also flip lock, which is an all or nothing fold out extension. Between the two of them, you can gain over 50mm of adjustment. For you imperial folks out there in the old colonies where I live, that's about 2 inches. Now the clasp is incredibly complicated, deceptively so. There is actually a beak and hook system that actually closes it. You can't pull it open even with the clamshell up, but the clamshell closes to lock, so it's double secure and dead reliable. The timepiece, of course, with an integration of end link and bracelet with case flank, is really designed to work as a system, so you can see how that link nicely hugs the flank of the case. The timepiece does have the traditional helium escape valve, so in conjunction with the 1220 meter or roughly 4,000 foot diving depth, this is there for you saturation divers. If you are a saturation diver, you already know what that is and what it does. For everyone else, it's a conversation piece. It's there to let helium out of the watch when you're ascending from complex gas dives. The bezel features a Cerachrom insert, and all of the wells and calibrations are filled with a small layer of platinum. There's a luminescent pip or pearl on the bezel that's actually covered with its own sapphire cap for durability, and the dial marks the return for the first time since the mid-1970s of the red script on the Sea Dweller dial. So this is the Neo Red Sea Dweller. White gold indices, white gold hands, cyclops eye magnifier, and perhaps better suited to this larger watch dial, which it dominates less than the equivalent on a Submariner. A Submariner a bit overpowered by the Cyclops. On the Deep Sea or the 43, you see here perhaps a better match. The timepiece does feature the latest in Rolex technology, internally caliber 3235, now with a 70-hour power reserve thanks to a reprofiled mainspring and barrel, as well as the new Chronergy modification of the Swiss lever escapement. It uses Leica etching and high-tech profiling to reduce the amount of energy consumed, such that the watch is now basically a 3-day power reserve compared to the prior 48-hour. Hacking seconds, stop seconds, that is the ability to stop the seconds hand, as well as a quick set date and a date that jumps precisely at 12 midnight. The watch is as tough as a battle cruiser, or perhaps I should say a battleship. That perhaps, or even a missile sub. That's probably the right analogy. This one's a big boomer. Jump into the Seiko, part of a family that launched in 2008. The Grand Seiko brand was severed from Seiko in 2017, at least in a formal sense, and Grand Seiko from 2017 on adorns the top of the dial. SBGA229, the watch is substantial. You can see that it features a clasp and bracelet somewhat similar to the Rolex, but a bit more elegance about how it sits. 44 millimeters. Nevertheless, it wears smaller as it's 14 millimeters thick, quite a bit slimmer than the Rolex. And although similar lug to lug at 50.6 millimeters with 53, the measurement from end link to end link, it's the curvature of this case as well as its low stack height that creates the impression of a smaller timepiece. On my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, you can see how secure and flat that is. You can also see that the case does have more camber about it. The bracelet is a substantial piece, though it doesn't feel quite as redoubtable in the hand as that of the Rolex, and you can see that sizing is done with pin sleeves, so that's one element in which the cost of the piece was cut. However, this is a watch that retails for $6,000 versus over $11,000, about $11,350 for the Rolex. So for about half the price, I feel like you're getting far more than half the watch and half the bracelet. It's nicely executed too, with polish and satin, and the clasp with similar double locking system like the Rolex, which features an internal hook and beak and then a clamshell. This one features a trigger locking system, so you have to depress the triggers and open the clamshell lock, and you can see how both of them come into play to secure everything in place. There is a slider system. The clasp is stamped out, not milled out like the Rolex, so it's not quite as substantial. You don't feel like you're holding a solid ingot of metal. That said, it does have a trigger system and an incremental slider action, so you can adjust it incrementally. You just don't get quite as much total extension as you do in the Rolex, but you get about a solid 30 millimeters. So let's leave that extended for the time being and close everything up, and you can see what it's like when you extend that over a dive suit. Also good for use over a winter coat. This is where the Rolex can't compete. Case finish and case form. The Grand Seiko is simply more beautiful. It features Grand Seiko's tin plate manual Zaratsu polish to create an optically smooth, distortion-free mirrored edge. And this is where Rolex has no answer, because hand-finished Rolex cases haven't really been a thing since the bezels were washed away in the late 2000s. So this timepiece, visibly handmade on the outside, and I mean that in the best sense. It's not crude, it's exquisite, and Rolex really offering no answer for that degree of artistry. The bezel is not quite as secure as what you get on the Rolex, and by that I mean it's an ADLC, or amorphous diamond-like carbon, over a metal base, which is to say you can scratch it more easily, but it also can't shatter or fracture like the Rolex's ceramic can. The action, like the Rolex, is very refined, although the edge of the bezel isn't quite as sharp. If you need to grip this with wet hands, I can imagine it would be a little bit difficult to gain purchase. The hands on the dial are immense. The contrast is high, and cathedral-style hands, adopted from pilot's watch, is something you hardly ever see on a dive watch. There is a date, there is a power reserve, the quality of the finish, the hands and the indices is very high, and you'll note that there's a dramatically sloped Rayhaut or chapter ring outboard. The timepiece, though you can't see it, powered by spring drive, quartz accuracy, but no motors, no batteries, no capacitors, mechanically driven by the spring, timed by a quartz oscillator, built by a watchmaker, and serviced as such. This is a lifetime watch with the precision of quartz, plus or minus 15 seconds per month, versus -2 + 2 for the Rolex superlative chronometer standard as measured per day. This is mechanical soul with quartz precision. Let's review the advantages. The Grand Seiko, far greater precision. 3-day power reserve is about the same as the Rolex, but the mechanical innovation of the spring drive system is in a class by itself. The power reserve scale, giving you an extra measure of peace of mind. You know your watch isn't running down on power before you take a dive. The timepiece costs about half as much as the Rolex, and pre-owned these sell for about $4,500 to $5,000 versus about $14,000 to $15,000 for the Rolex. The timepiece is easier to wear on a smaller wrist, and the luminescence of this watch blows the Rolex out of the water by night. It's just a more distinctive, more intriguing, more innovative product. The Rolex feels like a panzer in the hand. This is a timepiece that gains value after you purchase it. This is a watch with a bracelet and a case and a clasp that all feel several classes above the Grand Seiko. A watch that costs almost twice as much, but it feels it and it looks it. The edge of the bezel is far sharper. It's easier to grip. The ceramic insert is more scratch resistant, and I'll give the action a slight edge over the Grand Seiko in detent as well as click quality. The timepiece, tank tough on the inside and rated to far greater depth with a helium escape valve for added value. Those who need it will know. This is a timepiece that feels its price, but I'm going with the innovation and value play of the Grand Seiko. Let me know in the comments below which one you choose. Grand Seiko and Rolex. I think Japan just blew Switzerland out of the water with that shot.